We're going to be talking about mistakes, mischief, and mayhem, and how they relate to discipline as opposed to punishment and rescuing. And we're also going to talk about bullying, but how do we raise a character who is not a bully, or a bystander, not so innocent bystander, or the targeted child, but the bravehearted kid, willing to stand up and speak out and step in and do the right thing when the burden is heavy. And we'll be talking initially about how we raise such a kid who's willing to stand up and speak out. For instance, when the high-status social bully says to all the other girls at 5 years old or 15, I don't like the new girl. You want to be in my group? Don't eat lunch with her. I want your daughters to be the one to say, that's mean, that's cruel, and have the courage, and it does take courage, to go sit next to the new girl. But she will do that at cost. There'll be no scratch and sniff stickers and stars, catch and be and good awards, lunch with the principal. What you'll probably get is, oh, Miss Goody Two-Shoes, or you're next. And in the locker room in middle school, when the high-status social bully says to all the other boys, look at that kid over there, different skin color, religion, gender, physical or mental ability, the big 5 for hate crimes. What makes a hate crime different than any other crime? It's criminal bullying. Let's go mess him up. I want your sons to be the one to say, back off, leave him alone, he's not such a bad kid. But he too will do that at cost. The young girl will get, oh, Miss Goody Two-Shoes, or you're next. And the young boy might get, what are you, chicken? What are you, just like him? But to stand up and speak out, step in, how do we raise that kid willing to do that? Well, first of all, you and I have to walk our talk and talk our walk. Can our kids see us standing up and speaking out and stepping in when the burden is heavy for us? Because if we won't do it, how on earth are we ever going to expect our children to know that that is a good way to behave? A little background. This is gray hair. I am 78. I've been doing this work for 56 years. I have 3 children in 3.5 years, made up for my convent years. I'm a former Franciscan nun, obviously former, with a husband and 3 kids and 3 grandkids. And no, I didn't marry a priest, and yes, I met him after I left the convent. So that'll answer all you Catholics' questions for the day. And I also have 3 grandkids. One turned 18 yesterday. And then I have a 17-year-old in Colorado who I taught to drive, which was an interesting adventure. And then a 15-year-old who knows more than anybody else in the family as far as he's concerned. He'll get smarter later and wonder how we got so smart. So we have those kids. My 3 are like day, night, and afternoon, and those of you who have more than one child will know that none of our kids are alike. No matter how we parent them, we have to be flexible enough to parent each individual child for who they are. And we want to raise them to stand up and speak out. But where does that start? Very, very young. Let me get a handle on the group here. How many of you have or work with infants? Preschoolers? Kindergarten through grade 3? 4, 5, 6? Junior high or middle school, also known as unable to be an adult, unable to be a kid, wanting desperately to be both. High school, beyond. Any grandparents? Yeah, what a difference. I love being a grandparent. And people say, well, then you can give them back. I don't want to give them back. I want to be an integral part of their lives. My mother, God bless, lived to 92, and she fell, and she died very quickly after that. But of good mind and a deeply caring person. And at her funeral, my grandson, who was young at that point, drew a picture of him and his great-grandmother as she taught him to make rice pudding. And in the memorial at our Mass, the little memorial booklet had his drawings and the rice pudding recipe. And the priest said, my goodness, the first time we ever had a recipe in a memorial book. But she had a tremendous impact on that young boy's life. And now on every holiday, because he also got grandma's rice pudding bowl, great-grandma's rice pudding bowl, And he makes that for special occasions for anybody who asks. So you don't know what kind of impact you have on a young person's life, but it'll go on forever, generations. So how do you begin to raise responsible, resourceful, resilient, compassionate human beings who know how to think, not just what to think? Stand up for values and against injustice. It begins very, very young with something very, very simple. Red pajama, blue pajama. When my kids were little, I didn't say, do you want to go to bed or not at 2? I didn't say that. And you don't say that to a 2-year-old. But I said, do you want to go to bed now with your red pajamas or now with your blue pajamas? And one might show up with red bottoms, blue top. And I've always said, if it's not life-threatening, morally threatening, or unhealthy, let it go. It says to a young child in the mixed clothes, I have agency in my life. I matter. I can make decisions. They are the kids more likely to step in the lunchroom or the locker room because you have said to them, you matter and you have agency. Then you increase it, age appropriate, ability appropriate. Constantly increase responsibilities and decision making, decrease limits and boundaries. So when they leave our homes and our schools, they're making all of their own decisions and truly responsible for all of their own behavior. But we have to make that happen. It doesn't just happen. Red pajama, blue pajama, 3 outfits, pick one. Now, our oldest is a financial analyst. Our middle daughter was a stunt woman in Hollywood, leapt off cliffs and got set on fire till she had her baby, Chance, the rice pudding kid, and decided that's probably not the best career to be in when you're raising a kid, leaping off cliffs and getting set on fire. And then we have our third, who's an artist. So you can see they are like day, night, and afternoon. But our third in preschool, 3 outfits, pick one, he used to put that in such interesting combination that out of absolute desperation, I made him a large button that said, I dressed myself. And he proudly wore that to preschool every day. Took a lot of issue off of me about what the kid was wearing. Then you increase it again. Here's your school clothes, here's your play clothes. Pick something from your school clothes. And regularly our middle daughter would show up with the layered look. All school clothes, definitely layered. Now I know a lot of parents who would say, go pick out an outfit and then stand there, you can't wear that one. Now again, it's not life-threatening, morally threatening, or unhealthy to wear the layered look, you let it go. It's like kids with shoes on the wrong feet. If they hurt, they'd move them. But we worry, worry, worry. You know, I've yet to see a senior with shoes on the wrong feet, but we spend an awful lot of their early childhood worrying about it. No, you let them go. My oldest, by high school, was picking out all her own clothes and actually purchasing her own clothes. She had an allotment that she could use. Well, her freshman year, she wanted designer jeans, had to have those designer jeans. She's now a financial analyst, remember? But she bought those jeans and realized she had to wash them out almost every day. And one day she said, I think I made a mistake. She's recognizing herself. But my middle daughter wanted Doc Martens. Do any of you remember Doc Martens? She still has hers. They were so important to her that she still has those god-awful looking shoes, but she loves them. And that wasn't a mistake for her. She sacrificed a lot to be able to buy her Doc. We said, we'll buy regular shoes, you want Doc Martens? You're gonna have to pay the rest, the difference. But letting them make those kinds of decisions in their lives. I've had a lot of parents with middle school kids come up to me and say, would you look at this kid? He was such a good kid. He was so well behaved, so well mannered, so well dressed. Now look at him. I look at the kid. I get to know the parents. I say, you know what? He hasn't changed. They go, what? I say, he hadn't changed. From the time he was little, he dressed the way you told him to dress. He acted the way you told him to act, said the things you told him to say. He's been listening to somebody else tell him what to do. He hasn't changed. He's still listening to somebody else tell him what to do. Problem isn't you anymore. It's his peers. The kid hasn't learned how to think. So I'd like you to look at, in your homes and the programs you work in, what responsibilities and decisions are yours, and as wise and caring adults, there will always be ones you need to keep. And what responsibilities and decisions that are age appropriate and ability appropriate are you willing to give your children? And do you have a plan to constantly increase responsibilities and decisions and decrease limits and boundaries so that when they leave our homes and schools, they're truly making all of their own decisions and are making choices that are appropriate in their own lives? And not saying things like, well, he made me do it. It's not my fault. If you'd have done, blah. No, we want them to have agency and to believe in themselves. And we've got to believe in them by giving them the opportunity in all areas of their lives to make lots of decisions. So we need to look at that. The next thing, look at where are you coming from philosophically as an educator or a parent. All of us have a parenting toolbox in here. Do we have any educators in here? Yeah. You'll know why I'm using parenting toolbox at this point in a moment. But we reach into our parenting toolbox, compliments of our parents who raised us, the community we grew up in, and the culture we grew up in. Some of you grew up in very vital, functioning, healthy families. You're so lucky. You reach in for that tool, for a hammer. You pull out a hammer. It serves you well. The rest of us who came from less than vital, functioning, healthy families reach in for our hammer, we pull out a hatchet. We make a mess of whatever we're doing. And then we start going to parenting workshops, we read parenting books, we take a technique from here, a technique from here. And if it's in a book, it's got to be right. And an expert from afar, anybody over 100 miles, so I qualify, comes in and says it'll work. Wrong. You have to take anybody else's techniques, bounce them off your own philosophical tenets. And if it won't bounce, I don't know who said it, what kind of research is behind it, don't use it. There's a lot of crazy stuff out there in parenting today. Just go on TikTok and you will see such divergent views about it, but you gotta know where you're coming from. And as educators, why did I say parent toolbox? Because when you get tired, worn out, and frustrated in your profession, you don't reach to the university manuals. Your mother's words roll off your tongue. Your father's hand goes in. You say, I wouldn't ever do that. Because that's the toolbox we go back to. And there are tools in there that you have to say, don't need these. Don't need them at all. Now, when my two daughters in their 30s had their first babies, I said to them, what did we do? I always throw my husband in there so he can take some of the blame. What did we do you would not want us to do to your children? My oldest said, well, I have to think about that. My youngest right away said, I know, and I'm okay. She said, do you remember when we'd be out in public after your first book came out? She had to nail it there. And she said, if we were acting up, you would grab our arms and squeeze tight. My heart sunk. Because you know who else used to do that? My mother. And that was the tool I hadn't ever examined, not even thought of, but immediately did. And I promised them I would never do that to their children, and I have not. But those are the tools that we need to examine and say, nah, it didn't serve us so good. Wasn't the best thing, or now I know better, as Maya Angelou said, I do better. And so getting a new tool for that. So I'd like you to examine that toolbox. And every kid needs 6 critical life messages every single day. I believe in you. I trust in you. I know you can handle this. You're listened to, you're cared for, you're very important to me. Children need to hear that in lots of different ways every single day. But do we really listen to our kids? Your teenager comes home, you're busy doing something, and you say, how was your day? Fine. This is not fine. They were speaking something else. Now we speak 5 ways: our bodies, our face, our eyes, our tone of voice, and what we're actually saying. Only 20% of what you and I communicate is done with words. The other 80% is what our body's doing when those words are being spoken or not spoken. It's like that little 3rd grade boy had a teacher who did not like 3rd grade boys. Kid nailed her on it and said, you don't like 3rd grade boys. Teacher looked down and said, that's not true. I like 3rd grade boys. And the little boy said, would you tell your face that then? Think about it. What are we really speaking? And are we listening to what our children are speaking? And in bullying, when a girl says, "You can't come to my party," is mean and cruel. But "you can't come to my party" indicates that the kid was probably targeted by that other little girl. So we need to be able to read body language if we're going to understand what is mean and cruel and what is not, which is a whole issue about bullying. But kids need to know we hear them. I believe in you. I trust in you. I know you can do this. You are listened to. You are cared for. You're very important to me. So that's our first tenet. Kids are worth it. My second tenet is I will not treat them in a way I myself would not want to be treated. Wouldn't want it done to you. Don't do it to a kid. Notice I didn't say do unto them as you'd like done to you. It's very different. Don't do to them what you would not want to do to you. Put yourselves in those shoes. And third, if it works, it must leave my dignity and my child's dignity intact. Not just if it works or appears to work, but does it work and leave both parties' dignity intact? I always marvel when I see a parent of a 5-year-old, "Don't you ever hit your brother anymore." He just did. You've taught him that when you're bigger, you can hit or find somebody smaller, and he just did that with the younger brother. So we have to walk the talk and talk the walk before we can even begin to talk about bullying and what it is and what it is not. So look at the basic philosophy that you're coming from. Mine is, you don't have to have the same 3. Kids are worth it, won't treat them in a way I myself would not want to be treated, and if it works, it must leave both parties' dignity intact. The bully, the not so innocent bystander. William Burroughs said it so beautifully. There are no innocent bystanders. What were they doing there in the first place? And all of you who have come tonight and online will get electronic versions of all of this information on parenting with wit and wisdom, the bully, the not so innocent bystander, and mistakes, mischief, and mayhem. So you don't have to worry about making sure you got it all down. It all is on those handouts that I use in my university courses that are 2 of them, mistakes, mischief, and mayhem, and the bully, not so innocent bystander, each 30 hours courses in themselves. So I'll go through it quickly, but feel free to ask me questions as we go along. And I will have a time at the end for you to ask questions. But let's look at number 1, what is bullying? And what isn't it? The strange thing about anti-bullying programs, and you put one on, everything becomes bullying. My kid was bullied. No, they were fighting over a soccer ball. Big difference. So it's important that we discern what is bullying and what is not bullying. I'm going to start on a home scene here. 2 kids fighting over a TV program. That is not bullying. That is a conflict. The sad thing in homes and schools, we tend to use conflict resolution for bullying scenarios, and it won't work. Give you an example. We have 2 women here. They're friends, maybe, and they're fighting over something. Conflict will work with them. However, she calls her a gross name. And she comes up to me and says, "She called me this horrible name." And we say, "Oh, I just went to a conflict resolution workshop. Let's work this out here." So you put the 2 girls down and try to use conflict resolution skills. It will not work. You know who will win when you put those 2 down to resolve a conflict when it's really mean and cruel? The bully. "Oh, I'm so sorry if you were offended by what I called you. I didn't realize you were that sensitive to your name. I didn't mean it, honest." And you look at me, "I didn't mean it." And she's sitting there like the Dixie Chicks. "I'm not ready to make nice." And we say, "Well, come on, you've got to live together with one another these next few years." But you know better. You know as soon as I leave, she's going to target you again. Don't use conflict resolution when it's a bullying situation. And I'll show you as we go through bullying what an alternative to that is, and with mistakes, mischief, and mayhem in regards to discipline. But let's look first at what it's not. 2 kids fighting over a TV program. Normal. Next time your children fight, first thing I want you to say is they're normal. Children who do not fight grow up to make lousy spouses. If any of you are married to somebody who will not enter into conflict, keep the peace, let it go, don't bring it up. You know what I'm talking about. We need to know how to handle conflict in our own lives. So we have to teach the kids. Now, there are 3 kinds of families, just like there are 3 kinds of programs, 3 kinds of schools: brick wall, jellyfish, and backbone. Those of you in the courts see this all the time. Probably see a lot of brick wall or a lot of jellyfish, not so many backbones, although kids have free will and peer pressure to make sure up in the juvenile justice system, if we can call juvenile justice system the justice system. We have a lot of work in this country to do on juvenile reform. And so we want to work with our young people about how to handle a conflict. So 2 kids fighting over a TV program, brick wall. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Turn that set off. Nobody's watching it. The only person to solve that was the parent. Didn't teach the kids how to solve their own conflicts at all. My way or the highway. Jellyfish. Oh, kids, you're brothers and sisters. You're supposed to love one another. Don't do this to me. Nobody solves it. But a backbone parent, now look at the difference between backbone, brick wall, and jellyfish. A backbone parent gives you flexibility you don't get from a rigid brick wall, and we need to be flexible when we're raising children. But it also gives us an environment that's conducive to creative, constructive, and responsible activity you don't get from jellyfish. It's not a mishmash of the 2. It's very different than the 2 of those. So a backbone parent knows the slower you walk, the quieter you are, the better your chances of it being over before you get there, and you won't have to deal with it. But if it's still going on, you gently turn the set off, take the remote, and say you're fighting. I always like to tell kids what I think they're doing. You're fighting. Not, I think I hear you saying, I hate it when people say, I think I hear you saying, and the kids are going, didn't you hear me the first time? No. You're fighting. You may both have this remote back as soon as you both come up with a plan. Now, what do I need? A plan. They never say it nicely. Oh, Dad, we need a plan. So don't count on it. But one of 3 things will happen. They'll share, they'll both get up and leave it, or one of them will come up with a plan they both can live with. As long as the one who came up with the plan does not use brute force or intimidation. I mean, if one says, I'm going to beat you over the head, you say, that's not a good plan. I know you can come up with a better one. Notice I didn't say, we don't talk like that in this house. Yeah, we do. We just did. But that's not a good plan. I know you can come up with something better. We want to invite them to come up with something better, and I'll help them out if they can't. But most of the time they can from about age 4.5 on. Now, if one says, you let me watch this program today, you can have 2 tomorrow. You and the older kid know it's Saturday, nothing's on. Don't say a word. This is not the teachable moment. It comes the next day when the little one goes, there's nothing on. Now he's ready to learn. But I'll guarantee you if you interfere, and by the way, it is interference the day before, and say to that older one, that's not fair, he can rightly say to you, you're always rescuing the younger one. I'm a special ed teacher. My degrees are an LD, an ED, and MR. The old acronyms. I used to say I was the emotionally disturbed teacher. I meant that in more ways than one on some days. But how often we in special ed rescue that child and tell the other it's not fair. Instead, I say to him, I noticed you're giving in to your big brother a lot. Would you like to learn a few good lines? And you teach them the lines. Like, I'm willing to let you watch this program today if I can have this one on Monday, this one on Tuesday, and I want it in writing. You teach that little one to do that, nobody's going to walk all over him. But that's a conflict. Normal, natural, necessary. You're there to help them learn to solve them themselves when you're not around. And conflict is very normal. It has nothing to do with bullying. But now we have the 10-year-old who has the 5-year-old's arm up the back, and we're not talking a yoga pose here. The kid's in serious pain, screaming at the top of his lungs. You rush in there, and as soon as your daughter sees you, she drops her brother's arm and starts comforting him. And we say to that little one, "What are you screaming like that for?" And the way your daughter looks at your son, because bullying has to do with intimidation, he knows if he says anything right now, it'll be a whole lot worse for him when you leave. So he says, "Oh, nothing, Mom, nothing." Well, then quit screaming like that. You have just retargeted the target. But step back a moment. When you walked in there, you saw something you wished you hadn't seen. You saw your daughter smirk. It's an uncomfortable smile. In Colorado, we call it a shit-eating grin. But it's that smirk on her face. You saw that before she saw you. That's bullying. A conscious, willful, deliberate, hostile activity intended to harm, where you often get pleasure from somebody else's pain. You rejoice in their pain. It's not healthy. It's kind of sick. It's about contempt for another human being. The daughter pulling the brother's arm up the back to see pain is about contempt for her younger brother, an utter dislike. And that needs to be dealt with. And so we need to look at the difference between conflict and bullying. And now in bullying, there's always an imbalance of power. There's always an intent to harm. That pulling up the arm with a smile on the face. There's always a threat of further aggression. All the 10-year-old had to do is look at the 5-year-old, and he knew it could get worse if he said anything. And if that is not dealt with, then terror is created. And once you have terror, it is an end in itself. And then you have young people terrorized to go to school because that other little kid in kindergarten was choking him every time the teachers weren't looking. Or in the lunchroom, they spit in his food. Or in middle school, won't let him sit at the lunch table with him. And so we need to be aware of what bullying really is, that it does have that imbalance, it does have the intent to harm, it does have the threat of further aggression, and we cannot let it escalate to absolute terror. Because then you have kids who won't get on a school bus because they're terrorized about what might happen. And they don't even have to do anything as bullies because the other kid's terrorized. Now, there are 4 ways and 3 means of bullying. The first one, I'd like you to take a serious look in your district for the definition that is there for bullying. I'm going to bet many of them say must be continuous and repeated over time. Now, I have been fighting that definition since 2000 when my first edition of my book came out, and the World International Bullying Forum has also been grappling with it. And what many of us have come up to is the fact that it can be a one-time significant event. Once in the toilet ought to be enough. Once called a slut matters. Once locked out of a chat room because they don't want you in, they're being mean and cruel, is bullying. It does not have to be continuous and repeated. How many of you know if your state definition or your school definition says must be continuous and repeated? How many of you think it must be continuous? It says it. Now you say, oh, but my goodness, I can't change that. You're a school board member, right? Yeah, you are too. You're a school board member, right? Oh, okay. Well, nevertheless, you have to look at your policies and how they exist. And it may say must be continuous and repeated over time, but I would dare you not be upset if your kid's head was dunked in the toilet once and say, oh, it's not continuous, so it's not bullying. It can be a one-time significant, mean, and cruel act. The second is the most common, continuous and repeated. It's the one we don't always see the most. And it happens over time, and then it finally flares up, often with the targeted kids striking back, and they're the ones who get in trouble. because we didn't deal with it the first time it happened. And so how do you change that? Very easy. You say, it is often continuous and repeated over time, yet can be a one-time significant, mean, and cruel act. And you fixed it. So number one is a one-time. Number two is continuous and repeated. Third is hazing, ritualized initiation intended to denigrate, diminish, or dehumanize a person in order to get into a group. It happens in fraternities. Every year we lose 1 or 2 kids in this country in a hazing initiation. We got to find better ways to celebrate recognizing somebody in a group. And how often I hear, especially in the high schools and in colleges, well, they willingly did it. You don't understand then how powerful it is to need to belong to a group, to be included. That kids will do dehumanizing things in order to get into that group. We as adults need to change those kind of rituals. Now, athletics has done a pretty good job of that with laws that have been put in place in athletic programs. However, we still have a ways to go there. But you can also be targeted in drama club. You can be targeted in chess club, in band, in the arts. You know, hazing isn't just with athletics, so be aware. That is not just some hazing. Any hazing, by its definition, is a form of bullying. The last one is the one that all of us have to deal with. My bullying book has had to be updated 3 times for one reason: cyber technology or digitally enhanced bullying, because it's changed so dramatically. And now we have a federal law that went into effect in January of 2025. And the acronym, not the name of the bill, the acronym for the bill is Take It Down Act. So there's a whole lot of words in between there. But it's the Take It Down Act that mandates that if some people have used, no matter your age, have used deep fakes, have nudified a picture of a classmate, made them nude when they weren't, have created pornography with AI, with a real person being intimidated or targeted, that now tech companies must respond within 72 hours to take it down, and hopefully sooner than that. Their platforms are now having some obligation. It's not enough. We still need to look at different laws. France has looked at some pretty heavy ones, England, Canada, Australia. In Australia, you do not get on those platforms before 18, when the frontal portion of your brain is a little bit more developed and you're a little media savvy than you would be at 12. And we now see instances of 6-year-olds being targeted online by predators. And you say, my goodness, how did a kid get online at 6? Mommy gave him her phone that has games on it, but also other platforms. And once the kid's into mom's phone, they get on it. And you think, oh my goodness. We have little ones now at 2 years old. When you hand them a book, they try to slide the pages because on the screen, you just slide the pages. We need to teach young people to be media savvy. And that's the one that's so difficult. And in the handout, so you will all get electronically as long as they have your email here, I have given them a 68-page summary of the bully book, where you can very quickly look at one whole section on media and its influence. You will get a bullying handout. Those of you who work in the field, there are PowerPoints for parents, for students of 5th grade on, and for educators. And those PowerPoints you can share as parents with your schools. They're free to all of you. It's electronic. Please feel free to share. There's also a whole thing on my latest book, Mistakes, Mischief, and Mayhem, which explains that in detail in 10 pages, I believe. So all of that's there for you, so use it. So there are 4 ways of bullying, but there are 3 means to do that 4 ways: verbal, physical, and in my day we called it relational. Young people now call it social, are clueless, which may be a clue about their human relationships. They call it social. Verbal is the most common. Boys and girls do that one equally well. Bullying starts about 4.5 for girls, 5 for boys. And you say, oh my, it's a learned behavior. And since girls are more verbal than boys, they tend to target verbally earlier than boys do. And people are often shocked that a 5-year-old's good at bullying. But you need to remember it's a learned behavior. You have to be taught. There's an old South Pacific movie song, you have to be carefully taught to hate before you're 6, 7, or 8, to hate the people your relatives hate. Bullying is about contempt for another human being. And from that contempt can come bigotry and intolerance. I work in Rwanda with orphans from the 1994 genocide, where in 100 days, almost 1 million human beings were macheted to death. Those human beings were Tutsis, but the nickname they gave to them were cockroaches. Armenians were called dogs during that genocide. And in the Holocaust, Jews were vermin and bacteria eating at the fabric of our society. Rohingya today are called fleas. Step 1 is the dehumanization of another human being using words. And we have to look at our own culture today and see the dehumanization of groups of people. And we have to say, no more, not here, never. This is safe harbor for every person. I say that in my classrooms. I say that in my community. No more, not here, never. It's mean and cruel. And that dehumanization defies who we are supposed to be. As Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, we're interrelated, interconnected, interdependent. Martin Buber said it many, many years ago. It's I and thou. I'm unique and you're unique. You're a thou, not an it. Bullying starts when we make someone into an it. And in my genocide work, when I first put that book out, a CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company reporter said to me, I thought you lectured on parenting and teaching. I said, where do you think it starts? The dehumanization of another human being. In our homes, our schools, and our communities, because it is a short walk from hateful rhetoric to hate crimes, to crimes against humanity. It's no giant leap. Genocide's not an unimaginable horror. It was thoroughly imagined, meticulously planned, and horrifically carried out by people who turned other human beings into an it, using words. Dehumanization. That's why we cannot write off a 5-year-old calling somebody a gross name. Calling someone a retard. Oh, well, he doesn't even know what he's saying. Ah, yeah, he does. He's learned from somebody that that name is hurtful. He may not fully understand it, but he knows it's hurtful. And they often say it with a smile and try to get others to join in. So verbal bullying alone can pack a tremendous wallop, be an entree to the other two, or combined with the other two for an even greater wallop. Physical bullying is the least amount done. It's one we happen to see the most because it's so visible. Kids can say something online. Kids can whisper a rumor, walk down the hallway and say something that nobody else can hear except the kid it's intended for. But physical bullying, we see the signs. Very few boys actually resort to physical bullying. They fight a lot, but that's not bullying. They threaten, but that's verbal bullying. And an even smaller number of girls resort to physical bullying, although that's on the rise today, but they don't have to. They have in their social arsenal something far more powerful. Social bullying, shunning, rumor, gossip, and exclusion. How devastating that is. And for those who say, well, physical bullying is the worst, I would like you to look at the book, The Ethics of Memory. The researcher wanted to study people who had been physically tortured using functional MRIs to study their brain. And what the researcher found is there's 2 kinds of pain when you've been physically tortured. The pain of the injury and the pain of the insult when you were being physically tortured. The dehumanization, the humiliation that you felt, the disintegration of your sense of self. And he found those two pains. The physical pain, unless you're physically damaged for life, like John McCain in Vietnam, had his arm so badly tortured that he could never lift it higher than this without severe pain. So that pain stayed. But most of the time in bullying, that physical pain fades. Sad to say, on some kids it does not. They do permanent brain damage with assaults. They severely injure somebody's nervous system and the like. But typically that pain will fade. But the pain of the insult when you are physically bullied does not go away. In fact, if it's not tended to, it tends to grow. And that's where we begin to see so much PTSD. So he decided, well, let me look at verbal assaults, the barrage of verbal abuse. Interestingly, he did not find any physical pain, because there wasn't any, but there was the pain of the insult. And that insult was as great, if not greater, than the person who had been physically tortured. The pain of the insult was grave. No wonder so many boys say, I wish they'd have just hit me instead of demean me and isolate me and rebuff me and make me feel like dirt. So we have to watch the verbal. We have to address that. The interesting thing is he then studied people who had been in isolation, who had been shunned from their peers. And what he found was no pain of injury, unless the kid had been put in an isolation area where he harmed himself out of sheer frustration, banging his head, hitting the walls and the like, and then there would be physical. But for the most part in isolation, the shunning and the rumor and the gossip and the exclusion, the pain of the insult was as great, if not greater, than the one of the insult in physical abuse. So we need to address verbal and the social as gravely and as importantly as we do the physical, because we know the impact it has on their brains and their bodies. So verbal bullying, physical bullying, social bullying. What arsenal do the young girls have? That social isolation, and the rumors can be devastating to young girls. Boys do it, but not as often. Boys often go from verbal to physical. They may do the isolation, but it's rarer. Girls go from verbal to relational and perhaps on to physical, but more rare is that. So we have to address them all. But then we have the bully circle. And let's look at that. Sebastian Haffner, in his book Defying Hitler, called it the trap of comradeship. How many of you work with young adolescent boys? Then you understand, you're one, yes, the need to do in a group, the need to be included. And a gang of boys will behave in a way an individual boy would not behave. Collectively, girls do the same thing. However, in every genocide had a youth group that they could count on to do what they were told. In Rwanda, it was the soccer clubs who obeyed their coaches, who also were genocidaires. So they went along to get along. And so the bully circle, the trap of comradeship, is a fascinating look at how we work collectively. So in the center is the targeted child. Notice I didn't say victim. Gavin de Becker, who wrote Gift of Fear, says there is a gut calling in our gut to keep us alive, and that we need to learn to listen more carefully to the gut, not just totally depend on it, but listen to it. It wants to keep us alive. And Gavin de Becker worked with people who had been stalked. And one of the people who had been stalked and escaped was somebody who had escaped from Ted Bundy, who killed many girls. And she said that she felt she should have done something. Maybe if I'd have done, maybe. He said, quit beating yourself up. You were targeted by the man. He's the problem, not you. And she said to him, I should have listened to my gut, because the first time I met him, something was wrong. Something said this is not right. But she said, but he was a good-looking lawyer. As if good-looking lawyers can't hurt you. Well, he wasn't a lawyer, he was a law student, but she had it close, you know. And it wasn't until he was about to ready, and she began to suspect something, where he was going where he wasn't supposed to be going, and she fled out of his car because her gut said, get out. We want to teach kids not to be fearful of strangers. I always marvel those stranger danger programs. Who do you have to go to when you really need somebody and nobody else is around? A stranger. Who tends to harm kids? People who know them. Rare that it's a stranger. But if you teach your kids to listen to their guts, if they say don't like to be around an uncle, talk to me, tell me about it. No, let them know it's always safe to tell about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they say, I just don't feel good around him. Talk to me. Don't ask questions like, did he do something to you? Talk to me, tell me. Leave it open for them to be able to address that. And you know what? Maybe he doesn't need to be around Uncle. In a milder situation, my husband's aunt, old Italian, grabbed the grandkids by the cheeks and the nieces and nephews by the cheeks, and my son hated it because he had big cheeks, and she would grab on tight. And she said, I don't want to go to Auntie's house anymore. I said, talk to me about it. She squeezes my cheeks and it hurts. And I said, well, what could you do? What could you do? I don't know. She's bigger than me. I said, what do you think you could do? I don't know. Do you think you could say to her, Auntie, I want to give you a high five, and please don't touch my cheeks, that hurts. You know, letting them talk. That wasn't any kind of sexual abuse. Right? Auntie just loved to grab cheeks, and it hurt. But son needed to understand it's his body, and he needs to be able to speak about what he can handle. An elementary school teacher has a sign that the kids point to how they wanted to be greeted. Is it a high five? Is it a yes? Is it a hi? And for the little ones, you want a hug. But they got to choose how they wanted to be greeted, which is a good way to say, I have agency. And we need to teach young people, especially those who are targeted, and lest you think it doesn't happen in your house, sibling bullying is a big thing. Volpe did a 20-year research project, only one of its kind in the world, out of England, 20 years following people who are targeted by their siblings, and found kids who have been targeted by their siblings then go to school already weakened and more vulnerable to being targeted than kids who are only targeted at school. And I've had people come up to me after a lecture and talking about sibling bullying. They'll say, my brother is still targeting me at family gatherings and we're 50. Or she's still controlling the family and now she's controlling my parents with elder abuse. See, some people don't grow out of it, and we have to recognize that it's real within the structure of the family. And again, you have to be taught to be mean. Somebody is teaching them. Sometimes it's online exposure on a regular basis, but often it's within the confines of a family. And we say, oh, he didn't mean that, or you must have fallen. Be more careful on the slide when Johnny pushed Susie off the slide. And she protested, but she was younger, and boy, her brother wouldn't do that, because around adults, he's just absolutely fine. So we have to be more aware that arm up the back is mean and cruel, and it is sibling bullying. So be aware of those kinds of issues around bullying. So verbal, physical, and social. On the bully circle, at the very top, after you have the target, you have the bully. Now, bullies have 3 roles. They can be an instigator, planner, or perpetrator. When they're young, it's often all 3, that they instigated, they planned it, and they did it. Older, they tend to get in that group more and will play various roles. The instigator is the girl who spreads an ugly rumor, but she didn't spread it. She just told her friends to spread it. And when they got caught, because they do get caught, they wouldn't dare say who instigated it. So you have caught the henchman, but not the instigator. The planner is the boy who wants to beat up that kid that's the same size as him, so he gets his henchman to do it. And far be it from those big boys to tell who put him up to it, because they know what will happen if they rat on him. So we often catch the perpetrators, but not the instigator or the planner. Most of the time, it's all three, and the same person's doing it, but they enlist the henchmen. Now, henchmen are just on the list right down from the bully. Now, that's the kid you raised to do to please. They did to please you, now they're doing to please their peers. But how do you know you caught the henchman? By how the parents behave often. Often you'll hear a parent saying, oh my goodness, I didn't teach my kid to do that. Oh, he's a good kid. He's always done whatever we told him to do. Clue. Always doing what we told him to do. He goes along to get along. So when the girl says, we don't want that new girl to eat with us, and right next to her is the henchman, the new girl's walking over, seeing an empty seat, and was going to invite herself to sit there, and the bully says to the henchman, put your backpack down. Now the henchman goes along to get along, puts her backpack down. She didn't think of it, but she did what she was told to do. Now how do you know if you caught the bully? Very typically you'll hear, what proof do you have? And that other kid asked for it. He does these things too. And my son didn't do that. You probably caught the bully. Look hard, but you probably did. And you'll never get a henchman to report it to you, ever. Because they are too afraid or intimidated by the bully, and they want to go along to get along. Right below that's the active supporter. They didn't put the backpack down. They didn't even instigate it. But they pulled their camera out and videoed the young girl going to sit down, and now there's no place to sit, and she's walking away with her face down. And they posted on TikTok. And the parents will say, well, my kid didn't do the bullying. No, but she did something to increase the girl's pain. She's part of the problem. And legally, you can only hold the first three on that circle accountable for their behavior. And that includes in school. However, as an educator, I wanted all my students that participated in any way to be held accountable and responsible for their own actions. Right below is the passive supporter. That's the kid who saw that it was on TikTok and laughs at that girl's pain. And her parents will say, but she only laughed at it. Well, she's getting pleasure from somebody else's pain. That is not a good thing to be doing, is getting pleasure from somebody else's pain. Because the trip up the circle is too quick. You don't want your kid to be a bully or a henchman or an active supporter. So she needs to be held accountable for what she did do. Whether it's apologizing to the young girl for laughing at her pain, understanding the pain, or sitting with her at lunch. Somehow she needs to know that she's accountable for laughing at that girl's pain. Then at the very bottom of the circle is the disengaged onlooker. That's a kid who turns a blind eye and says, well, she's not in my class. There's not always a place to eat. There's other places she could sit. Or as adults, to say, boys will be boys, girls just want to be mean. It's part of growing up. It should not be a part of any kids growing up to be targeted. Now, on the upswing is the potential witness, the kid you did raise to act with integrity and civility and compassion, to see the other as a thou, to feel the pain of the kid being excluded. However, they're afraid. They're afraid they'll be next. They're afraid if they step in, they'll make it worse for the target. They're afraid they won't do it right, or they're simply afraid of the bully. Those are 4 valid reasons that a kid has for not stepping in. However, they know it's not right. So they will have to get rid of that headache with the cognitive dissonance. They got to get rid of the headache. So they start 9 lousy excuses. And one of those is, well, he's not my friend, or he is kind of dorky, or she kind of asked for it. All these lousy excuses. And suddenly, the pain's gone, because you blamed it on the target now, and you have joined the circle, that trap of comradeship. At the very top is what I'd like all your kids to be, the witness, resistor, or defender. Somebody willing to stand up and speak out, tell an adult. You need to let your children know at Safe Harbor at your home or in your program that it's safe to tell you, and you, 1, will keep a target safe, 2, will keep a witness safe, even if it means stretching the truth a little bit. I was in Woodstock in the Himalayas, not our Woodstock, but in the Himalayas, at an independent school there, an international school, where people seemed to be leaving from the boys' dorm, not wanting to come back. Their parents who had jobs there were leaving the country, but nobody would say anything. And then one boy, a Canadian boy whose father said, "We'll leave." And he said, "Please don't tell anybody what happened, Dad, please, please, please," because he's afraid of retaliation. But he said, his dad said, "Well, is there any way that you can tell the counselor, somebody in the building you trust?" So they figured it out. So the boy's walking down the hallway and knocks the school counselor, social worker, it was a joint job, knocked his books out of his arms, which was really out of character for the kid, and the counselor's looking at him. And he said, "Well, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry." So he's down helping the counselor pick up the books and passes him a flash drive. And on that flash drive is a fight club that one of the high-status seniors had established, where the younger kids had to beat one another till one couldn't take it anymore, on a regular rotating basis. Well, the counselor called in the father, who was a prince, pretty high up there. And the son felt that he was invincible, nobody was going to touch him. So the counselor said, "Your son has developed this place in the dorms where other kids have to beat one another up till they can't fight anymore." "I didn't do that." And the father said, "My son wouldn't do that. What proof do you have?" Good clue right there. And so he slipped the flash drive in, and there's the fight club with his son as the leader, making those boys fight, the younger boys fight. And the father said, "Where did you get that?" And the son's just waiting to hear the answer so he can go after them. And he said, "Well, you know, I regularly go online and look for different things that kids have posted, and I came across this." He was not going to reveal that a student had given it to him. And he regularly did go online more after that. So we have to, number 1, protect a target. Number 2, protect a witness. It's scary. Sometimes it's both. The witness is the target, willing to finally speak up and know that whoever they tell is safe harbor to tell. Sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a counselor. The interesting thing is, I work with paras today, it is often paralegals or paraprofessionals that they will feel comfortable with, because they have relationships with them on a daily basis. So I always ask students when I'm working with them, do you feel safe in this school telling somebody in a big assembly? And they'll point to somebody, sometimes it's the janitor, sometimes it's the cook, and they're a little taken back. And sometimes it's a favorite teacher that they know they can tell. It needs to be safe harbor for kids. You as a parent need to let your kids know they can tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you will be there for them. Not to rescue them or to punish them, but to stand behind them and help them deal with this horrible, horrible thing. Even in very young ages, I have the student be the one to present it to the teacher, as a parent is supporting the child doing it instead of the teacher and the parent, which says to the little one, "I have no agency. I'm already powerless in the school with the kids. Now I have no agency." No, let them speak. Let them write pictures or do what they need to do to present it in a way that they can. And you say, "Can you do that with special need kids?" Most of them you can. I don't have parent-teacher conferences. I don't believe in them. It's from kindergarten student-teacher conferences with the parents invited to come, where kids can tell you, where am I at, where am I going, what do I need to do to get there, in 3 areas: academic, work study, and affective skills. From kindergarten on up, every kid needs to be able to answer where they're at, where they're going, and what they need to do to get there. Empowering them in a bullying scenario to be able to talk to me about it, tell me about it, tell me what the child did, tell me what the child looked like when they did it. In it. So we want kids to know that they can be their own witness as well. Resistor is the kid who says to the bully, back off, leave him alone, he's not such a bad kid. Because he was never targeted by this kid and saw it happening and was a little taken back and was willing to stand up to that other kid. The third is probably the most difficult, the defender. That's a kid who goes and sits next to the new girl. That's a kid who steps in the locker room to protect the targeted kid. But I want young people to know, we know this is difficult. We're going to walk the talk. We need to read stories about people who have done this kind of resisting, to stand up and to speak out. You had a horrible situation not too long ago here where 3 young men stood up for a young woman who had her scarf on, a Muslim woman, a young woman, and some people were targeting her on the bus. And 3 young men stood up. 2 of them died. The third one is the one who stopped the attack, finally, and he was autistic. And he said, I could not have not done something. He felt this great need that he had to protect that young woman. So it's ordinary, everyday people who are standing up and speaking out, stepping in, doing the right thing when the burden is difficult. So we want our young people to move in that direction. The interesting thing, bullies have tremendous power to draw that trap up to them, and then they become complicit in the crime of bullying. But if kids see one kid standing up, it often gives them the courage, as the potential witnesses who are afraid to do it, to go sit to eat lunch with the new girl or to stand up for the targeted kid in the locker room. And the disengaged onlooker who had no skin in the game is more willing to move in that direction when they see others doing it. And they can break that cycle by pulling them up, by giving witness the ability to be that witness, resistor, and defender. Any questions on any of that before we go on to what to do and what not to do? Yes. Say it loudly for me.
What do you do if your child is targeted?
Your child is one of the people on the bully circle?
How do you handle that?
Yes. Okay.
My son's 8, but when he gets older in high school, I was targeted in high school.
And you don't want it to happen.
I never ended up getting in a fight, but I never made me terrified of that fight, and just wondering about that.
Yes. Okay. Is there any other questions specific to anything I've talked about? Because that's the next thing, mistakes, mischief, and mayhem. And it's the mayhem area that you want to be able to look at and say, but you want to I talk with kindergarten kids about the circle and say, all of these roles are hard to get out of, but you can do it, and you can always come and tell mom or come and tell dad. If you found yourself caught in that, and let them know it's a powerful pull. And if you find yourself caught in it, Dad's going to talk to you about how you can get out of it. And one of them is teaching them good lines, like rolling your shoulders around and down and standing strong. That's why I marvel we use the anti-bullying program, spend good money on that, and take it out of the arts. The arts are some of the most powerful anti-bullying tools. You have a kid in music. He loves to sing. Every day he goes into music, he has to roll his shoulders around and down and stand strong, not tall. That's a bias against short people. My husband's 5'4", now he's shrunk a little bit. 5'4", if he fluffs his hair up, and I happen to be biased. All of us are biased. I was biased toward short, dark Italian men. I married one. We all have biases, but I want to teach him to stand strong. And every day he goes to choir to sing, he has to stand strong. Goes to band to play a musical instrument, stand strong. Shoot a basket. You don't shoot 3-pointers in a passive posture. It's standing strong. I have children with ADHD be the first to climb a rock wall. Why? They take risks. And they go all the way to the top, ring the bell, and the other kids are going, wow, instead of, oh, he has ADHD, he takes his medicine, maybe he's off his medicine today, but here's a kid doing something they're fully capable of doing. And so pottery, you cannot throw pots in a passive posture. You can't play guitar in a passive posture. You can't march in the band in passive posture. And so you can't play a piano in a passive posture. So all of those arts help kids be strong in their core. And you teach them to say things like, that was mean and cruel, I don't need this, I'm out of here. As a targeted kid, rolling their shoulders around and down and standing strong. For your son, it's a matter of teaching him what goes on in that circle. And all of you will get the handouts that describe each one of those and the different kinds of bullies they may encounter. And you can share that with your kids and say, what if you got caught in this? Talk about a scenario. Use your own school examples, unless it frightens them. A school example about how you were caught in a situation and you wished you'd have said something and you didn't. And sometimes, as I talked to one man today, his friend had just turned on some kid, and both of the other friends got very silent, and years later, the bully said he had to apologize for what he had done. But what awoke in him was the reaction of his peers. And it was just like, we're not saying anything to him. We're not laughing along with him. So that's what you want to do, and give your kid lots of choices. That's one of the most powerful things you can do with them. And able to identify the roles so they can say, I felt like I might have been being used as a henchman. Or saying, you know, I went along to get along and I don't feel good about it, Dad. Okay, what can you do? Does that help? Yeah.
Yeah. When they're in high school, at what point is it okay to be like,
What?
handle business? If somebody's bullying you, stand up for yourself.
Yes. And teaching, there's a good book out called Tongue Fu by Samantha Horn. Some good one-liners. Yeah, it's okay to say lines, but don't say to them, say to the bully, please stop, that hurts. That's exactly what the bully wants to hear. Yeah, so don't do that. I always marvel that I find that in anti-bullying programs. Are you kidding me?
But is it okay to tell your kid that?
Please stop, that hurts. Now, let's say you had a friend. You have friends, right? And let's say it was the wrong time, wrong place. You were just joking with them and you've always been able to tease them. Teasing is mutual, laughing with one another. Taunting is laughing at. But you're truly teasing, but it was the wrong day, wrong time, wrong place. And he gets sad. What are you going to do? You're going to apologize? You're going to stop? Yeah, and say, I'm sorry. It looks like this was not the good day for that, or something like that. What would a bully do if they noticed the other person's tears coming down their eyes? They'd keep going. They just keep going. So I have to ask you, why on earth in anti-bullying programs are we supposed to tell kids, please stop, that hurts? Aggression begets aggression. Well, it takes one to know one. They'll get their clock clean. Remember, there's always an imbalance in power in bullying. Passive, please stop, that hurts. Aggression begets aggression. Passivity invites it. Assertion dissipates it, even if the other party doesn't want it to. I teach them, if they can't get the words out, now there's a program that you go stop. You can't tell a bully what to do, but this is a human survival tool, this posture right here. If any of you are into yoga, you know I just pulled myself into a core posture. You put your hand up, which is protecting you, not attacking the bully, and then you turn without saying a word, but self-talk. I'm a decent, caring human being. She's sure getting her needs met in a lousy way, putting it back where it belongs, on the person who did the targeting. If you tell a kid to ignore or avoid the bully, it eats at them. You try to ignore horrible comments about you, you'll just dwell on them, and it eats your insides. And by the third scene, bullies don't have to work on your kid. He's beating himself up. I am dumb. I am stupid. I am no good. So you want to, don't tell him to avoid or ignore. Don't minimize, rationalize, or explain it away. Oh, boys will be boys. Girls just want to be mean. Don't rush in to solve it. Oh, you want to. You want to deal with the bully, the bystander, and any adult who let it happen. But it says to the child, you are powerless. I have to fix it for you. Be there with them, support them, but don't rush in to solve it for them. Don't tell them again to avoid or ignore. Don't tell them to fight back. Defend yourself, yes. There's a whole big difference between a defensive move and an offensive move. You want to teach them to defend themselves. Now, Trevor Romaine wrote a great book called Bullies Are a Pain in the Brain. And he said, if it's 6-on-1 run, you'll look silly, but you'll look alive. I mean, use your head. And so you don't want them to be forced to confront the bully and say, well, don't be afraid, just go up to, no, not 6-on-1, you run. And so you want to tell them not to fight back, and that really gets some people upset. Defend yourself, absolutely. And that's why I use the form of Aikido. All 3 of my children have been trained in several martial arts. Maria and Joe themselves, one is an EMT and the other is a stunt woman, had to learn several different martial arts that were all in the point where you are assertive, not aggressive or passive. If someone's attacking you, use their energy to deflect it and to teach them. But most of it's verbal. The majority of bullying is verbal, teaching them good lines. And I have a whole litany of good ones and ones you don't want to teach your kid, like it takes one to know one, or please stop, that hurts. But remember, it's that assertive posture, that core posture in the mind and in the gut here. So what do you do? First thing you want to do is say, I hear you, I'm here for you, I believe in you, you're not in this alone. Bullies try to make your kid feel isolated. And we are saying to them, you are not alone, and I do believe you. Bullies try to make sure you believe their lie, not what the target is saying. So I hear you, I'm here for you, I believe you're not in this alone. The next thing, it's not your fault. Yes, you may have social skills that you need to develop more fully and the like, and we do work on all of those. But the problem's from him, not you. The next thing you want to say is there are things you can do, and you teach them about having an assertive posture, looking at how to find other groups to hang with, teaching them some social skills if they need it. And so you say there are things you can do, and there are people you can tell. And I want kids to be able to identify people they feel safe to tell. It's either mom, dad, sometimes it's grandma or grandpa they feel the safest, or an uncle or an aunt. And it also helps if you've said you've been there. And not that you get it, you've been there and it was hurtful. So you're letting him know it hurt in the time it was happening to them, to you, and to be able to relate to it. But if it didn't happen to you, you say, I've never had that pain, because it may not. Or, you know what, I was one of those henchmen that went along to get along, and I didn't feel so good about it. It's okay. We're not perfect. We all have different things that have happened in our life. Don't scare them. Well, do you know what happened? You don't want to scare the kid. But age appropriate, ability appropriate, for them to hear those kinds of things. The next thing you want to say is that in recognizing that this has happened, let's look at a plan for you. What can you do? And who can you tell at school that you feel safe? Teachers, I'm a teacher. I can't do a thing if I don't know it's happening, unless somebody tells me or I visually catch it. So it's important that we know, and you have to know as an educator that you've expressed to the parents that it is safe to tell me. And I promise you there'll be no retaliation, because nobody will ever know. I have sometimes let a kid know it's going to have to be some delayed justice here, because I promise you it's probably not the first time, and they'll say, no, it wasn't. It's the first time I had the courage to tell. I'm going to watch, and I'm going to have other people on staff watch, and we will catch them at it. But we will catch them, and we watch like hawks until we can catch them. We'll find if it's on the bus, we've got people on the bus that are willing to monitor that, to check it out. And why is everybody looking at me? Just looking at everybody on the bus, and you can catch them. They need to know that it is safe to tell. Any questions on any of that before we get into the mistakes, mischief, and mayhem? Go ahead. Yes. Just say it as loud as you can.
I have another question.
Yes.
The question is, your child cannot stand bullying because they were bullied growing up. So they became a defender of, the people that are being bullied, the targets, because they themselves were a target. How do you handle it when your child is the one reaping the repercussion or getting in trouble at school for
Standing up for somebody.
Protecting them?
Yes.
And protecting themselves, especially when it gets physical. What is the best way to speak with the faculty about why your son's the one getting in trouble because
You'll see that in Mischief and Mayhem. But you will, but I promise you, it is not easy to stand up. It's not easy. And how many of you have seen the movie Wonder? If you haven't, see it. It's about a young boy in middle school, which is where the peak of bullying occurs, in the middle school years in that collective group. In Wonder, a little boy got a genetic defect from both parents that made his face deformed. His sister was normal. She did not get the gene, but he did. And Julia Roberts was mom, and he wanted to go to middle school, and she was scared to death about putting him in that environment, and rightly so. And one boy befriended him who had also been targeted. So what do you suppose the group did that had been targeting the little boy that was deformed? They targeted the other boy. And what did he do? He joined the bullying group. Didn't want to, but did. And some situations showed up. That movie is the first I've ever seen that illustrated the bully circle. But how he got out is also in there. It's something I think you can sit down with your son and watch that movie and talk about his own situation and how difficult it was, because it was very difficult for the one boy who himself had once been targeted by these kids for being poor and not having good food and good clothing. And then he stood up for the little boy who had a facial deformity, and how the both of them grew stronger together, and how other kids joined in. Again, the circle can swing in this direction. But if your son is defending somebody, basketball, the first offense isn't called, it's when that other person strikes back that it gets called. That's what's seen. And so I want young people to know that I'm proud of you, kid, for what you did. And that it was in you to do it, and it must have been difficult to do. And I'm standing behind you as you deal with the consequences that they sometimes foolishly give you. Yeah. And so it's a matter of standing strong. I mean, standing up. I marched in the civil rights movement during my convent years. As a young nun, but the older nuns had fled the Japanese invasion in China. And they were so willing to get out there and stand right in front of those police dogs and the police because they believed in what they were doing. Only the young and the old could march. The middle ones had to keep the order going by working. But we could risk arrest. And so I watched those little Chinese nuns who had been through everything, had lost everything they had, and fought sometimes against the Japanese invasion, the rape of Nanking, if you're familiar with that, and all the horrors that attended that. But they were right there in human rights, for human rights. And so we drew strength from them. Your children will draw strength from you when you stand up and speak out in a community. And you stand up for your son and say, I feel good about what he did because he had to do it. And you folks need to begin to look at what that group of kids are doing to this other kid. Being able to state that. It's never easy, no matter your age, to stand up and speak out. We had a young girl in Colorado during the flooding season. We don't wish we had floods now, but during our spring runoffs, which we will not have this year, we haven't had any snow. But she heard, she was on a group trip with some friends, and she heard people screaming, and a young boy had fallen into the swollen river. She was a WSI, water safety instructor. She jumped in the water and grabbed the little boy who was tumbling down, hitting rocks on it with his head, and she grabbed a limb of a tree and hung on to it, kept the boy's head out of the water, and hung on till 911, the ambulances could get there. Now, she caught grief for doing it because she could have died. She also was hailed a hero, which she didn't want to hear. The boy died. He had already hit his head so many times, not anything could have saved him. So people were saying, well, you shouldn't have gone in. And she said, I couldn't have lived with myself had I not gone in with the skills that I had. She couldn't control, and yeah, oh my, got to get to mistakes, mischief, and mayhem. But it's letting your kid know that you're with them. And it shows that in the movie. where they stand up. It's the only one I've ever seen, with one exception, Sesame Street. The writers of, I was on the resilience board. My kids didn't care that I was on Oprah. They thought it was an embarrassment. How dare they do that? I do that during their teen years. But I arrived when I got on the Sesame Street Resilience and Bullying Board, and they took my book and created a scenario you can see on their app, Big Bird and the Good Bird Club, joining a club that he was invited to, but he had to change his feet, his beak, and his skin color, his feathers. And suddenly, Robin and Blue Jay realized Pigeon was a bully, and they were next. So they did a beautiful job doing that. So that one shows the circle too. But Wonder is the first I've ever seen of a teen movie where you can actually see the full circle in full display, and what it is to stand up for another, and how hard it is. That's what, at that age, to see, we recognize it's hard, but we're with you, kid. And I'm glad you raised them to feel comfortable enough in standing up. But there are consequences for doing that. Sadly, there shouldn't be, but there are. Yeah. And teaching a kid a good martial art doesn't hurt, because you don't show the bruises if it's a good martial art, and you deflect with their power, their attack. Okay, now, mistakes, mischief, and mayhem. Discipline, what it is and what it isn't. You will have a full handout. I think it's 10 or 11 pages long, but let's go through it real fast. Mistakes, mischief, and mayhem are not the same thing. Discipline and punishment are not the same thing either. Discipline is not punishment. We use the words as if they're synonymous. And I always worry when I hear things like harsh discipline. There's no such thing as harsh discipline. There's harsh punishment, but not discipline. Punishment's adult-oriented. It's imposed from without. It arouses resentment and basically teaches kids to respond with 3 F's: out of fear, fight back, or flee. Into themselves, afraid to make a mistake, or out the front door if they're adolescents. Discipline, on the other hand, if you go back to its Latin roots, to discipline with authority is to give life to a child's learning. It does 4 things punishment will never do. Shows kids what they've done wrong, gives them ownership of the problem, gives them ways to solve it, leaves their dignity intact. Whole lot different than punishment. And punishment can be physical, it can be verbal, and it can be social. That's shunning and rumor and gossip. I don't want to talk to you, you're not mommy's best, whatever, but it's punishment. And we hear adults saying today, well, I was whooped as a kid and it didn't hurt me. There's a defense there. And I want to tell you, we already recognize the harm. The family physicians have recognized the harm done by hitting and yelling and screaming and isolating kids. Those are all forms of punishment at home and at school. And so we need to look at a mistake and a mischief and mayhem. By the way, all bullying is mayhem. Not all mayhem is bullying, but all bullying is mayhem because of its intent to harm and to get pleasure from somebody's pain. Discipline is doing something with children. Punishment is doing something to children. Big difference. So let's look at a mistake, mischief, and mayhem. We'll start with a very little one, but it can be a 16-year-old in lab class who drops a beaker that has caustic material. In a mistake, let's give you a very quick example. A mistake, a kid is scribbling on a paper, drawing, but fine motor isn't fully developed, and he accidentally, with his permanent marker, goes on the desk. That's a mistake. No intent there at all. It's just a mistake. Mischief, another kid does tic-tac-toe on the desk with permanent marker. That's mischief. Another kid writes a kid's name in a gross term. That's mayhem. All 3 are markings, but what's different? The intent. It's called the big I and the 3 C's. What's the intent? The young girl rescued a boy because she felt she had the skills to do it. The content of what she did was absolutely pristine. The circumstance she did it in, a little boy's drowning. The consequences, whether they're intended or not, are the least amount that she can control. The boy did die. But she did, her intent was good, her content was good, the circumstances were good, the consequences she could not control. So I want to teach from about 5, by age 7, the age of reason, they fully understand it, the intent, content, circumstance. You have a 16-year-old who's out with his friends. The kid's been trained in the big I and the 3 C's from the time he was very young. He began to think that way. And they said, let's go steal some stop signs. What fun that'll be. We can put them in our rooms. And he says, well, it might be fun, but the consequences could be severe. Because that's the way he's thinking, the big I and the 3 C's. So mistake. We have a 3-year-old drops a glass. Be careful of the glass, don't drop the glass. 3 families. You klutzy kid, I swear you're going to use plastic the next 30 years of your life. Get out of this kitchen right now. Brick wall. Jellyfish. Oh, sweetheart, what was I thinking giving you a slippery glass? Come on over here and have some chocolate milk while I clean up this mess. Which says, when you have a problem, it's somebody else's fault. And then I get your kid in school. And he said, wasn't my fault, worksheet wasn't dark enough, teacher didn't give me enough time, the kid behind me was bugging me. Or the classic, you don't understand, teacher, he hit me back first. Backbone. Looks at the little one and says, oh, you have a problem, go get me a bag. 3-year-olds can't pick up glass, but they can hold a bag. You pick up the glass, they hold the bag, you help mop up the floor, and you say, which of these 3 different glasses would you like to use? One has 2 handles, that might be a little easier. One's plastic. You give him choices. And he made a mistake. What do you do with the mistake? Very simple formula. I don't care if you're 3 or 16 in a lab class. Own it, fix it, learn from it, move on. Very simple. So when your kid makes an honest mistake, those are the steps you go through. I've seen kindergarten classes where they say mistake, own it, fix it, learn from it, move on. So that the little one isn't beating himself up for a mistake because he gets punished a lot at home. By the way, those of you who work with young kids can pick out a kid from a brick wall family when they make a mistake. They cover their bums because they're afraid you're going to hit them. They put their hands up here or they hide their mistake. That's a good clue that they've been in a brick wall family because they have no control over making a mistake or how to fix it. My son made a mistake. He made a score for the opposing team in a major soccer tournament in high school. He was playing goalie, but he's also a left-footed forward, and the forward got injured. There were other goalies on his team, so he runs out, gets his other shoes on and clothes on to play out on the field, get his goalie stuff off, runs out on the field, the ball comes toward him, he falls flat on his face, gets himself back up, and goes down and makes a beautiful left-footed goal for the other team. As his goalie's going, no, Joe, no, Joe, no, but he wasn't paying attention, but as soon as he made the goal, he saw his own goalie. He knew right away he blew it. And he was like, ah. Now, some of the people on the sidelines were not very kind, and my nonviolent self wanted to wring their necks, but I didn't. But the coach handled it well. Because, you know, if you make a goal for the other team, your team loses that opportunity to get more as a bonus to advance if the other team's held to 0. Well, it's not held to 0 anymore, thanks to Joe's goal. The coach called him over and said, Joseph, get over here. And Joe goes over, he says, Coach, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. He said, I don't want an I'm sorry. That was a beautiful goal. Now go out there and get one for us. And I was so happy when he did that. But the coach also said, Joe, I should have told you this before. When you come from goalie and you go into a forward position, I want you to lean your body into the other side and look at what color the goalie's wearing. Just as a clue, a body clue and a visual clue. But he went in and made a goal. But you know, I was not happy about his goal as much as I was when the other team made another goal. So it wasn't his just sticking out there all by itself. But he made a mistake and the coach handled it. Own it, fix it, learn from it, move on. That's what you do with the mistake. Caustic material, the lab. You say, whoa, go get me the hazmat kit. And you stop class and you teach kids how to clean up caustic material. It's a learning example. So that's a mistake. Now, Joe also created some mischief. He broke the beaver bait jar at the Natural History Museum in grade 3. He broke the beaver bait jar at the Natural History Museum. Could have been worse, could have been an irreplaceable dinosaur leg. We were very lucky, very replaceable beaver bait jar. His teacher handled it beautifully. He was not paddled, which is still allowed in 19 states here. Colorado's one of them, but my district had banned it, so he was not paddled. He didn't get sent to the principal's office, which could have been punishment depending on how the principal handled it. He didn't have to write 550 times, "I will not break a beaver bait jar." And he didn't get banned from the next field trip. Instead, his teacher wisely said to him, "You have a problem, I know you can handle it." He had to write a letter to the Natural History Museum, had to replace the beaver bait jar. And for those of you who don't know, beaver bait is female beaver urine. He will never break another beaver bait jar. And before he could go on the next field trip, he had to have all that done and have in writing how he would handle his feet, hands, and mouth creatively and constructively on the next field trip. The Saturday morning, he got up early to get to the game warden. He was so excited, got his knapsack ready. Then the game warden very patiently explained how he had to collect female beaver urine. His eyes got huge. He looked at me, he looked at his dad, who was now smiling, and he said to the game warden, "I have to do that?" I thought the game warden's comment was classic. He said, "Well, I didn't break the beaver bait jar." And just as an aside, Joseph's senior prom was held at the Natural History Museum. What a fitting end to his public education. But you say, but wait a minute, a kid drops a glass, a kid drops a beaker, they were all accidental, why wasn't his? Because he was swinging his backpack with his buddy, having fun, while they're explaining dinosaur legs down the way here, where he was supposed to be. And his buddy hit him, they're both laughing, so Joe takes his backpack, swings it, the strap extends, the boy ducks, beaver bait jar is broken. That is not a mistake, that is mischief. That's the tic-tac-toe on the table. What do you do with mischief? Show them what they've done wrong, give them ownership, give them ways to solve it, leave their dignity intact, the 4 steps of discipline. Now, what if it's mayhem? How are we doing? Not good. What time is it? 7:30. We're supposed to be done at 7? 7:30? Ooh, 2 minutes on mayhem. And your handout goes through mayhem a lot, by the way. It's called Mistakes, Mischief, and Mayhem. In mayhem, bullying is mayhem. In bullying, you need to do 3 things. In the 4 steps, you have the 4 steps of discipline. In that 3rd step, restitution, resolution, and reconciliation when it's conflict. You reconcile, you come back together, and restitution, resolution, and restoration, if it's mayhem, that's bullying. Restoration's different than reconciliation, because sometimes in bullying, especially in sexual or racial bullying, there will never be the restoration where you come together, because the party who was harmed doesn't want to ever see you again. And that's fair to be able to say. The 2 girls who were having you're calling her names, restitution, own and fix what you did. Sometimes all the girl who was targeted wants to hear is you owning that I did call you that. Not I'm sorry, I don't care about it, I'm sorry. It's I own what I did. Resolution, how are you going to keep it from happening again? And won't ever call her that, that's what you won't do, but tell me what you will do. Not hitting her is not how are you going to keep it from happening again. So you give them options. I can sit in the back of the class, so I won't bother. I can sit in the front of the class. If it's real severe, I'm going to take a different English class. I know it's during your lunch hour. That's a bummer. You may have to find another time to eat lunch. But restitution, resolution. Then when you are ready, it's on your behest to sit down with her. Then, and even though you say, but my mom took my computer away till I'm done with this. Well, that's a bummer. She's not ready yet. You hurt her. And so usually targeted kids have a lot more empathy and caring. They're decent, caring human beings who didn't ask for this. And so she says, okay, I'll sit down with her. However, if you sit down and have a smirk on your face, I stop it right there. She's not ready. But if she is sincerely ready and she really wants that computer back, she says, I called you a gross name, and I will call you by your given name or your nickname if that's okay with you. How I'm going to keep it from happening again is I'll sit in the back or I'll sit in the front, or I'm going to take a different English class. And you might say, you know, that's all right. You can call me by my given name, and you don't have to sit there. I just don't want you calling me names. Can I count on that? Kind of thing. And then you say, and I would like to invite you to my lunch table. Or I'd like to invite you online, and I promise you I won't lock you out, and I'll make sure none of my peers lock you out either. However, she might say what Steve Seskin said, and don't laugh at me, the song he wrote with Alan Shamlin that Peter, Paul, and Mary made famous, don't laugh at me, don't call me names, don't take your pleasure from my pain. All I ask is that I can sit in English class, not be called a gross name, walk down the hallway and not be tripped, go online and not be locked out. What we have done is empowered her and humbled you. Not humiliated you, humbled you. And then we go through the 7 steps of rewriting your script with you. And we teach young people, both of them, to be empowered. How do you empower? The antidotes to bullying: a strong sense of self in relation to I and thou, knowing I have gifts and talents and liabilities, and so does the other person. Being a good friend. Bullies know how to lead. They do not know how to be a good friend. We need to teach young people friendship skills today. And then having at least one good friend or a buddy. Bullies are cowards. They tend to pick on somebody who's alone. But having a strong friend with them can minimize the bullying. And then teaching young people how to get in a group and when to get out. Now, mayhem in restorative practices in the juvenile justice system and the like, we have to look very seriously at the restitution, resolution, reconciliation when conflict has elevated to an aggressive fight and there's harm being done, or vandalism, which is a form of mayhem, and the like, racial or sexual and race, and all the different kinds of ways that we can be mean and cruel to people need to be handled with restitution, resolution, restoration, conflict, reconciliation, all others, restoration, to restore what has been broken, not to heal the bond of friendship. They may never be friends, and they may never have any kind of, you don't want a relationship with, you just want her to leave you alone.